Hi there. You're listening to the Tech Leaders Podcast, brought to you by Be Digital and Tramshed Tech. Today, you'll be hosted by Gareth Davies. Gareth will help you and our guests navigate some of the industry's most exciting topics, from the challenges of sustainable growth through to continuous innovation and everything in between. These are the behind-the-scenes stories from the leaders at the forefront of the digital revolution. So stop typing, close that laptop lid, and tune in for this episode of the Tech Leaders Podcast.
We have an approach of find, keep, and grow. So how do we make sure that people from the most diverse possible places think about Facebook as an employer? But then when they're in, what's that sense of belonging? Do they feel this is their company and this is their place? And then there's the growing of that. So, we work really hard on kind of targets, but we also work really hard on making sure that the culture of inclusion is strong.
I think it's fair to say that Facebook has impacted people's lives across the world arguably more than any other technology company. And October was an historic month for them. Firstly, we had the global outage, and then, of course, we had the somewhat unexpected rebrand announcement recently. So what a privilege it was to interview the VP for Northern Europe, Steve Hatch, at this watershed moment for the organization. We actually also caught Steve during Dyslexia Awareness Week, something which is very dear to him. So we talked about that. Steve is actually the type of guy that I could speak to all day. We covered the controversial topic of content moderation and censorship and the social responsibility that inevitably comes with that. Steve's experience of joining Facebook at a crucial period in their history, the unique culture there and the amazing people he gets to work with. And we also discussed Facebook's incredible new smart glasses collaboration with Ray-Ban and virtual technology at large, virtual reality technology at large, and much, much more. Speaking to people like Steve is the reason we set up this podcast and the reason why we enjoy doing it so much. I'm sure you'll enjoy this one. I hope you do, and I hope you were as inspired as we were. It's Steve Hatch. Steve, thank you so much for coming on the Tech Leaders Podcast. How are you today?
I'm really well, and thanks so much for inviting me. Great to be with you, Gareth.
I've been really excited about this one. Obviously, it's a bit of a boring time to interview someone from Facebook, isn't it? It's not much going on.
It's never a quiet moment for us.
Absolutely. So, look, first of all, I think I wanted to ask you about Dyslexia Awareness Week. I know you're very passionate about this cause. It's something that's obviously close to your heart. I know you're involved in a couple of things to do with the sort of series of events this week. Tell us about where people can get more information on this and where they can maybe tune into some of the stuff that you're doing.
Yeah, well, no, thanks very much for that, Gareth. And it's certainly, cognitive diversity is maybe something else we'll talk about kind of more broadly throughout this. But yeah, specifically right now, it is Dyslexia Awareness Week. I am proudly made by Dyslexia. And I use that phrase because it also is a great organization called Made by Dyslexia, who we partner with quite extensively. And tomorrow we are hosting a Facebook Boost Your Business exclusively aimed at dyslexic startups, founders, creators, and businesses, and is going to feature the success stories of dyslexics. And the other element that if people are really interested in is the work that Made by Dyslexia have done with EY on the value of dyslexia and how dyslexic skills map so well to the skills that business leaders are looking for in the workplace now, as we've sort of moved from a kind of 19th, in a way, actually almost not even a 20th, but a 19th century model of retention of information to a 21st century model of interpretation of information and creativity and being able to see the kind of context. And dyslexics often have those skills in abundance. And certainly it's been my big goal to get rid of that stigma. Let's view dyslexia as a superpower that it is. A big passion area for me. And what's really interesting is, I have my Facebook email. It says, apologies for any typos. I'm dyslexic, and who knows? Maybe in the future that won't need an apology. It'll just be what it is. And then a kind of hashtag Made by Dyslexia, and it's incredible just how many, in particular, parents have emailed me after seeing that email and saying, "Thanks so much for that. Can you tell me more? My child's just been diagnosed, or I'm not quite sure where to go." So, yeah, a lot of this is not just moving from reducing stigma, but also kind of celebrating the skill set that's there. And if anybody wants to see more, they can go to madebydyslexia.org, where you'll see lots of great talks, some really great kind of inspirational speakers, and from across creative fields, from business fields, and from the world of kind of media and technology. So yeah, encourage everyone to jump in and share with their kind of colleagues or parents, or just involve themselves.
Absolutely. No, that's really good. We'll put that in the show notes as well. I think I found it quite amazing how many people suffer from dyslexia. I think it's 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 people. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And there must be many people who don't even know they've got the condition, who are sort of out there and just struggling, and just don't know too much about it. So things like this are super important. I think your involvement is probably much appreciated by the organisers.
Well, thanks. And I've got to say, I'm really not the only organisation. There's so many great organisations, and probably one of the ones that have actually been really pioneering this is GCHQ, actually, who are really strong on cognitive diversity. So the idea that having that different talent in makes for a better kind of better output for the things that you're trying to do. I mean, it's true for technology, it's true for creativity, but kind of also true for that important national service as well.
It's quite astonishing how many. It's kind of a disproportionately high amount of celebrities in the arts field, you know what I mean, musicians and things like that, who are dyslexic. I mean, I know Noel Gallagher is, for example. I think I heard Tom Cruise is dyslexic, Orlando Bloom, and many others. It's quite amazing. But I think, look, let's just very quickly. Let's come back to cognitive diversity, because that's something I want to get especially recruiting for cognitive diversity. I think that's really important for business owners and people and hiring managers of sorts. So maybe we'll come back to that. But I wanted to talk a little bit about yourself first, Steve. Okay, and let's roll back the years and go back to the beginning of your career, 1988. Actually, I want to go back to you. Obviously, decided to embark on a career in advertising. So London advertising, 1980s, that should have shouts a lot of connotations to many people. So talk us through that decision of getting into the industry and that period in your life.
Yeah, well, thanks, Gareth. And I don't want to perhaps kind of like puncture this sort of sense of excitement and kind of creativity and kind of Ferraris, because I mean that wasn't my experience then. I mean, I think it was happening for some others, but that wasn't the area of kind of advertising I would actually put myself into. But the reason I was originally attracted to it as an area was, and I left college to go and so I don't have a degree, and because I left college to go and take up this take up a job in advertising, and I just was really excited by this combination of both the art and commerce, and these two things kind of being combined together. But the area that I found myself being more and more drawn to was the media part of advertising. And I don't know if you've seen the kind of the great TV series Mad Men, in the kind of set in this kind of glamorous locations with these kind of incredible people, and it's really easy to spot the media person because he's like the slightly dweeby person in the corner, and there was a bit of that. It really was seen as being in a way not the unattractive end of it, but a more practical, pragmatic end. But I found it completely absorbing. How to think about what the media looks like, how to look at what the best places to put the ads for the best effect, and the heart of it is, if you're interested, I haven't met a single person in advertising that isn't interested in people, fundamentally interested in people, and that's certainly been a big propeller for me kind of throughout my career and experiences. But it was a really good time, and I've got to say, one of the most important things that happened to me was working with just the most incredible female mentor, a woman called Kathy. And I don't think she was trying to get rid of me, because actually my first job wasn't in London, it was in Southampton, which is the area I'm from. And after a year and a half, she said, "Look, if you really want to do this, you need to think about moving to London and making that decision." And I'm kind of always grateful for her mentorship then. And I think throughout my career. I've just been really, really, really fortunate and lucky to work with really great mentors. And yeah, she was unquestionably the first.
What sort of milestones stick out for you then in that sort of first half of your career then, Steve, as being important turning points for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of them, and yeah, perhaps probably the two kind of biggest ones. One was as I moved into as media became more digital and digitalized. So being able to really understand that. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to be kind of old enough to have had a ZX81. So I did have this kind of tiny like literally 1 meg keyboard. Actually, probably not that much larger than my phone these days. This device where I was just typing in and then recording onto a cassette program. So I'm early enough to kind of see that beginnings of technology and the potential that it had to connect people. But sorry, old enough to do that, but also actually young enough to do that, I should say, but also old enough to be able to really experience the full service creative agency in its heydays. So to be surrounded by people who were able to put it. So that was a really kind of big part to me, to be able to combine those things together and see where media is going. And I remember when Siberia, which is an internet cafe, because we had those, on Whitmore Street, the first I heard, opened up, and I was just astonished to go and find this new what is this thing? Is it a medium? Is it a technology? Is it a channel? And sort of being a bit disappointed to spend 35 minutes to watch a NASA weather photo kind of chunkily download, kind of line by line. But even then, you could really see what the potential this technology had. So that was the big one, which is being immersed in that world of media and seeing how technology was transforming it. And then the second was really a personal journey of one moving from the strategy role I was in into a leadership role and becoming a managing director, and kind of finally when my final role was a really kind of wonderful agency called MEC, part of the WPP group, where I was the CEO, and I remember having this really important moment when I realized what it meant to lead rather than be a specialist, and this sense of, because being a planner, I've got to say, or a strategist, it's an amazing job. Like it really is. It's like being like this the set piece player in a football game, an American football game. But, you walk onto the field, you kick the ball over the bar, you take the applause, you walk off the field, and that's it. So it's very kind of good for the individual, and I kind of had to learn that I had to find a new motivation, which is not look what I've done, clever me, but look what they have done, and sort of a little bit in brackets like clever me. So to be able to kind of create a culture of inclusion, a culture of positivity, and a culture of ambition and boldness, and to be able to lead that. So they were probably two things, like genuinely seeing that birth of the internet in its mainstream way and thinking about how that would change the media environment, and then secondly that personal journey of going from a specialist into leadership, and I think that's a journey that just keeps giving, and I'm having to constantly learn to do.
Sure. So much has changed from when you got into the industry up until now. I mean, in terms of the technology and the tools and the etiquette and all these kind of things. What constants have remained? What did you learn early in your career, which is still very much the case today?
Well, there definitely is the kind of constant that would be. Let's say if I think about advertising and how that's changed, is creativity. It is the real. It's almost a kind of obvious thing to say, but it is how we interpret it. Brands that are able to tell great stories, companies that are able to tell great stories, and it's not easy to do. And whether you're if you're someone just staring at a blank piece of paper trying to come up with an idea, that's a heck of a thing, and a heck of a thing to take on. Now, how those ideas get expressed, well, that's dramatically different than certainly the industry that I joined some decades back. And the kind of other thing I would say has been really consistent throughout all of that is, actually, it might sound like an oxymoron, but that constant change and constant innovation. And that's the exciting thing about areas. People are always changing. Expectations are shifting all of the time. So you have to really understand that. And even the kind of work that we do at Facebook, a lot of it is we have to work really hard to keep at the pace of people and people's desire to see kind of like ever improving products, ever improving standards. I kind of always sort of think about how so quickly we adopt something as being normal these days, And I remember the first time I spoke to my Alexa and asked it what the time was, and it's because I was I'm a cook, so I love to cook, and my hands were all messy, so I couldn't I couldn't set a timer, and it told me, and that was great. And almost immediately I was thinking, well, why can't my car tell me that? Why don't my toaster tell me that? So technology that can seem like magic one day, we just becomes the norm the next day. So that relentless need to continue to innovate and inspire.
Let's talk about late 2013 then. You were at the pinnacle of your career, I suppose. You were CEO in a major, one of the big six advertising companies, WPP Group, a group I know quite well. And obviously the Facebook opportunity comes up from somewhere. Talk about that transition and that period of your life.
Oh, yeah. I don't think I've ever necessarily spoken about this in any depth before, but I do remember that there was a partnering really well with Facebook. I'd had the opportunity to go out to the West Coast, and this was kind of very early, and I got a sense of the team and the mission. Even then, it was there was just a feeling around what was happening there, and a real excitement that was just so palpable and really truly inspiring, and a sense of being full of people that really want to do great things and do them really well, and the mission that sat at the heart of the company, which at that moment, we have a different mission now, but certainly the mission first 10 years was to be able to connect the world, was a sort of shorthand version of it. And I wasn't looking to move. And then the kind of conversation came up about having the first UK leader for Facebook. And initially, I got to say, and I don't think I've ever shared this actually, I wasn't that sure. And it wasn't that, and this is, maybe I don't know who might listen to this, but just from a career advice perspective, the reason I wasn't that sure is not because of Facebook, because of what I was doing. And I was thinking, well, I knew what the next 3 years are going to look like. So I thought, well, I can't go and do this. I can't go and do that because I'm doing this. And I remember just distinctly walking through Golden Square a couple of days later, and just a penny dropped, and it was, am I crazy? Like, this company's so exciting. The people, every single person I've met is just full to the forehead with integrity and excellence. And I also thought I knew how I could help at that point. And this has taken me a couple of days to process, and how I could help. And at that point, social media was seen as quite fringe, a bit experimental. But also at that point, it was the same time when there were 24 million people using the platform in the UK. Kind of go, well, there's quite a disconnect there. So there's a really interesting thing to go and do. So I phoned and said, look, I'm really sorry, but if the conversation is still open, I'd love to carry it on. And anybody that has a job at Facebook tells you don't get given a job at Facebook. You have to go through a pretty tough process, and it was good to get at the other end of that. And I singularly haven't looked back. And I guess maybe the two biggest differences in the world of WPP versus the world of Facebook, and WPP is still a deeply impressive company. But the differences, I would say, is one is pace. And I don't mean that they're in hard, but in technology, it's almost akin to retail in a sense as the rhythm of the bit. It's very, very staccato. It's very, you can see what's happening. You can see how you've got a really kind of strong sense of the vividness. So much more of a staccato rhythm, whereas in my previous one in advertising, it's much more about baseline. So what I mean by that is you'd be on the same project for really long extended periods of time, kind of quite often pitches, and incredibly fascinating and consuming, but just quite different. And then the second, of course, is moving from an organization that is B2B in its to one that's B2C. And it took me up until this most recent job to be in a company where people really know what it is, and in many cases have some really really big points of view on it.
Absolutely. I think it was an interesting time for Facebook around then, wasn't it? I think it was kind of pre the election where Trump got elected. It was just before that, and it was still seen by many as being a bit fringe and a bit different. But there was just relentless ambition from the leadership team in Facebook, wasn't there, to take this forward and make it sort of obviously not just in terms of the advertising element of it, but as a news source, as something, as having other services around just the core social media stuff.
I mean, I think there was just and there is today, and that's still very consistent, actually, kind of 8 years on from that conversation, with just a real belief in the importance of the mission, and to have a mission-based business. Even if we go back then, a lot of the world wasn't connected. Even then, we were seeing that, and Facebook had only recently just made its transition from desktop to mobile in a meaningful way. So a lot of those rules were being written. That was kind of pre WhatsApp, pre video, all of these things that we now take for granted. But what was consistent then and is consistent now is the sense of, well, why are we doing this? Why are we doing these things, and how intrinsic to the mission every single decision was. So really ambitious for the impact, the positive impact that could be created, for sure.
Can I just ask you a little bit about that then? Obviously, you joined this obviously extremely ambitious leadership team, and you were working alongside some incredible people. Nicola Mendelsohn, I know, is your colleague now, and many others as well. Obviously not wanting to start naming people, but there is one person I want to name, Mark Zuckerberg. What was that like, meeting someone like that, and then obviously working with him? What was the sort of, what was your impression, and how did that sort of progress in terms of your relationship?
I've got to say, what I wasn't expecting, initially, I'd sort of heard of these terms, and to people that are in technology, they're super familiar. But things like all hands, things like Q&As, stuff that isn't actually, it's become more common parlance, but it wasn't necessarily then. The biggest thing that I was really blown away by, and actually continue to be, is just the kind of openness and accessibility. The fact that there's still in a company of our size and scale now, there still is a weekly, there is a weekly all hands, and there is a Q&A, and you can ask anything, and I'd be pretty candid and say, like, anything does get asked as well. And that open culture, that sense of connection that comes from Mark downwards, kind of right the way throughout the company, that remained really consistent. And it was just quite surprising, to be honest, that when I initially joined, to go, oh wow, this is real. This is how it operates. And I think that was certainly probably the thing that I was most struck by, is that real attention to the culture in the company, and really making sure that everybody is able to kind of do their very best and to play to their strengths within the organization. And that's certainly, as someone who is, as I already mentioned, someone that's dyslexic, someone who, I have had experience of mental health issues in the past, and I know kind of many others have, and I'm just now, I've just recently been diagnosed with hearing loss, which is something I'm coming to terms with a bit, but actually to be able to be all of those things, and to be in a company where that authenticity and that inclusion is real. So I'm occasionally, to be honest, Gareth, I'm still occasionally pinch myself and go, is this right? Yeah, this is real. But what I would say as well is you're right about the excellence of the people. And I mean, I was pretty good in advertising. I don't want to sound immodest, but I probably get some some A minuses on my scores, but I don't think my first couple of weeks it was, crikey, if I get a C+ here, like, I'm going to be really happy with that. And being able to go home smarter at the end of the day, not because of who you are, but because of who you've been around, is something that I still feel really lucky about today, even though I'm having to experience that via video rather than in person at the moment.
Hi, just a quick reminder that you're listening to the Tech Leaders Podcast. The Tech Leaders Podcast would like to thank Tramshed Tech, who allow us to use their world-class recording studio facilities. We cannot recommend them enough. They also provide office spaces and events, so make sure you go and check them out. Now, back to Gareth, who will be quizzing our guests on some of the industry's most topical questions.
Let's talk about neurodiversity very quickly then, okay? So obviously this is something that's very important to you. Obviously you've got your own story. I think it's fair to say, I get the impression you like to build teams and you like to have people around you from all sorts of backgrounds. How did you ensure that that was the case when you first joined Facebook? How did you build a team around you, and how do you continue to do that in terms of building diverse teams of people who are productive and suitably motivated to assist in the company goals?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly takes time. Would be the one thing I'd say as well. And I got to say, right now the team I'm working with, I mean, they're just extraordinary people, just absolutely extraordinary. And there is a bit of a Facebook motto of hire people that are better than you, and I'm definitely doing really well on that one. They are genuinely brilliant. But I think the short answer to that is you have to be really intentional. And we have been very, very ambitious, actually, as a company in terms of our public goals on where we're looking to increase the percentage of people from what were underrepresented groups. We don't want them to be underrepresented. We want them to be overrepresented in our company. But it's not just enough to have people in the company. You have to have a strategy to do that. So we have an approach of find, keep, and grow. So how do we make sure that people from the most diverse possible places think about Facebook as an employer? But then when they're in, what's that sense of belonging? How do they feel this is their company and this is their place? And then there's the growing of that. So we work really hard on kind of targets, but we also work really hard on making sure that the culture of inclusion is strong. So, and it's not new now. I think many companies have done that, but certainly managing bias training being like the cornerstone of that. And this was 4 or 5 years ago. And I have to say, it's not a criticism of the UK, but I do think the US is really progressive on this. Many, not just Facebook, but many US companies are really quite progressive on this. And and then the big question is, well, why? Why is this important if you're in business? And there are kind of two. There's one general reason, and there's another specific reason for Facebook. I mean, one in general, time after time after time, diverse teams perform better. Like the empirical support behind this, and it's not. I kind of find it hard to find what the argument is in the counter. Now, the other part of that is, at Facebook, we're big believers in scale. That's what we can do. We can create really great benefits to people at a really, really large scale, and can create real impact. And so that means if you're building products for the world, you have to make sure that your teams and the people that are within the company are as broadly representative of that total experience as possible. And certainly one of the people I'm often inspired by in Facebook is an engineer called Matt King, and Matt works in our accessibility team. And Matt wasn't born blind, but he actually became blind during his engineering degree in his early 20s. And so what he works on is the AI that looks at photo recognition for the increase of accessibility. And he did this incredible demo for me where he showed what his Facebook experience is like. Bearing in mind there are hundreds of millions of people, I should say, who are blind and partially sighted around the world. And as the world's got more visual, how do they participate in it? Because actually things like text and spoken word text, that technology is actually really well refined. Imagery and photos, that's a whole level of complexity altogether. But he showed me this post of how he experiences this, and it was a post, and it was voiced out, and it said, Jeff has posted. Post says, Friday night splurge. Your mind goes into like all sorts of interesting, curious places where you're thinking, oh, I wonder what Jeff's Friday night splurge is. But it's only when you get the smaller amount of more of a different additional information that all of a sudden you have this complete picture. And the addition, it says, post contains photo contains image, pizza. So all you need is that one word. All you need is that one word and that recognition to go from not knowing and excluded to a hugely more inclusive experience. And those are the tools that our teams are building every single step of the way.
Let's just quickly run on that one then. What are you most excited about right now then, Steve, that in terms of technology innovation that Facebook are working on?
Well, I mean, I probably do have to go from like the very immediate present, and we should probably touch on some of the impacts of the pandemic and some of the more kind of longer terms that. But I'm going to go from this moment we're in now to what the next few years might look like in terms of how the technology is evolving, and kind of in particular the work around VR and VR and AR, I should say, and what's increasingly becoming this kind of vision for what a metaverse looks like. Metaverse is, it's kind of a phrase that sounds like, what's that? What's that all about? But I mean, the easy way of the shorthand, I think it was first coined in a book called Snow Crash some time back. But the kind of best way of simply explaining that the metaverse is thinking about it rather than looking at the internet, which is what we do now. Well, I mean, in many ways, I know we're recording this on video as well as for the audio, and we're looking at the internet in practice, actually being in and within the context of digital environments, and that's some step that's going to take some time to build, and it really is about bridging that gap between the physical world and the digital world, so you can have even more meaningful connections than ever before. And Gareth, have you tried much VR?
I tell you what, the one I did do, which was really interesting, at a London Tech Week event, there was a demonstration of a VR sort of augmented reality situation where you look around and it kind of it latches on to items that you can see and tells you what it is, type thing. So I've tried things like that, but not in anger. I've not used it for commercial reasons or for social reasons or whatever. Just for demonstrations, So yeah,
it's really interesting. I remember kind of one. There was a Silicon Valley investor, I can't remember which one, and they said, there are two types of people when it comes to VR. Those that think it's the future and those that haven't tried it yet. And whether that kind of turns out to be true, I guess we'll wait and see. But certainly this blending of technologies with our physical and virtual ones. But we've seen. Actually, I'll just grab it here. So this is a Quest 2. So this is, and we have a really big team in London on our Facebook Reality Labs and working on this. So it's been our fastest growing ever VR headset. And actually, it's not just game playing. There's lots of kind of fitness collaboration as well. So we've just introduced workrooms. So I recently did an offsite in Sussex, but also at our headquarters in Menlo Park as well. So teams across the world kind of coming together. And then the other things I've got that we're seeing is how the technology will manifest in different ways. And I don't know if you can see this, but this is the first product of our collaboration with Luxottica, and so this is the Ray-Ban Stories. So what these have is kind of the cameras, so you can take video and you can take photographs really easy. There's a little indicator to see when you're recording or shooting. They've got speakers there as well, and a really easy kind of touch interfaces. So the idea that we'll be able to use these technologies, and this is a great product. I mean, it looks good. That's the you would be really hard to distinguish it from a classic Ray-Ban in any meaningful way. So being able to create things that more people can use, that they're very accessible and easy. And then just finally, with the other kind of piece of hardware, Portal, which we would have been doing this call on if we were doing something like Zoom, which is really good. I mean, for me, particularly during the pandemic, it's been such a great way to connect with my parents. So the foundations of technology that are coming together over time to really be able to create a very different way of experiencing the internet in the future than what has been quite phone focused or laptop focused in the past. So yeah, I'm excited about what we can do for that.
That's so exciting. I can't wait to keep an eye on that. Watch this space. So moving on then, I think I wanted to ask you about, obviously, I made a bit of a joke at the beginning, nothing much going on at Facebook. There was obviously a big issue this week with an outage. What happened there then, Steve? And it looks like it's all sorted now. Have you put, I'm assuming the provisions are in place for this kind of thing to never happen again. But what was your experience of the outage?
To be honest, like quite similar to most people that experienced it. And in fact, the first thing I had was a call from my daughter telling me that her art teacher was cross with me because they were trying to use Instagram to demonstrate something. And can I get it fixed? And it's not the first time she's asked me to fix stuff.
You know you're in trouble when you have someone has a conversation like that with you.
Yeah. And look, I mean that's quite a trivial example, kind of obviously, but oh my goodness, like we really felt it, and I mean, I've just used this as an opportunity, as we have said across the board, to say really, really sorry, because we know just so dependent, many people are to connect with families and friends, and also the businesses that use our services around the world. And this was a really significant disruption. I mean, I can certainly send later on to just some we're still unpacking kind of exactly, but it certainly wasn't seen. It was part of our kind of internal kind of updates in our systems that we had, and something didn't go as expected, which is, I know, a bit of an understatement. But your question, I think, kind of what's really important within this is like how we react to this internally as well. So how do we learn? And this is not, and what I witnessed and kind of what I saw, and you see the culture really coming through, and not a blame culture, but a learning culture. Okay, what did we do? How do we make this better for next time? Let's make sure that we improve it. But there's no doubt it was really significant, and in many ways a real reminder of just the responsibility that we have. Not that we need reminding, but it was a very real reminder of that responsibility that we have for people that are using the services all the time. So it was it was certainly was a tough one, and I'm really glad that I'm really grateful as well to huge numbers of people that worked. You can imagine unbelievably hard to get that back up and running as soon as we could.
I think in times of crisis, you really find out a lot about not just yourself, but your team, don't you? And I think, when people step up to the plate and sort of, put in a shift at a time in a crisis period, I think it probably brings you closer together as a team.
Oh, well, I think if you've got the right culture, it does. Yeah, and I definitely witnessed that on Monday. And again, I just want to say, send my apologies and kind of our apologies to anyone who was anything that was disruptive for them across that time.
Well said, and thank you for that commentary on the situation, Steve. Let's move on then. Onto another one: content moderation and social responsibility. I'm sure this is something you constantly get asked about. Let's just start with this. Facebook, as well as other social media platforms, are in a almost impossible predicament when it comes to this, because there's no way you can please everyone. So you just got to use common sense. Obviously you've got to obviously protect users, but also you've got to obviously respect people's right to free speech. What's been the most difficult challenge that you've faced and your team has faced in your time at Facebook in ensuring that content moderation is appropriate and really does respect people's right to free speech?
There's a number that I could speak to here, but if I think about the one that's been most challenging and actually has required the most level of nuance, goes directly to what you're saying, Gareth, of this question of freedom of speech. And I also just want to be clear, like, we're big believers in freedom of speech, but not speech without limits. And we have community standards, and to some extent, I think people don't often know what that is, but it is we are really transparent about the rules that we have on Facebook, and the removal of harmful content in any and all of its forms is something we work day and night to do, and that's not just a statement of intent. It's also we back that up with investment. So we put in. I used to say we invested more in safety and integrity than our entire company revenues at the year of IPO. We've now even been more public about that. So we spent in excess of $12 billion just on this area, and we have 45,000 people focused just on this area. So we take it super, super seriously. And the reason being is, for almost everyone's experience on Facebook, almost all of the time, is generally a positive one. I would ask people to, if they are using our products, like, generally speaking, most people will say, do you know what? It's either, it's just fine, or maybe a bit, maybe I'm a bit fed up because that's someone posting a holiday picture and I'm stuck in the office. It's that kind of degree of, sort of my whole grievance. But even if there is anything harmful, and we actually report on what's called a CSER, Community Standards Enforcement Report, and no other company does this to the degree that we do. We publish this quarterly. We track 13 areas of harmful content on Facebook, 11 on Instagram, and we may well extend those over the kind of coming months and years as well. And it measures some really important things. So one, which is the total amount of harmful content that we are seeing as a percentage. So what's the prevalence? So how likely is it? And as I've already said, across you might have to forgive me on this number, but there are, you can imagine just billions of interactions taking place across our platforms every day. When we look at Facebook, those figures are, and I'll just give the hate speech one, as an example, because that is an area that I'd like to go even deeper on. Is that's something between 0.05 and 0.06% of the amount of content in a 10,000 view sample that you would see of Facebook that's hate speech. Now, that doesn't mean that for each person that might have experienced that's not a significant issue, because it is. And we have to work really hard to minimize that. And and right now our automatic detection rate, so the amount of that content let's use the example of hate speech, that we proactively take down, is in excess of 96%. Now, that's not 100%, but what it is significantly higher than that would have been even like 2 short years ago, which would have been more like the low 20s. Nowhere near good enough. And so gradually over time, and actually, if you look at some of the, I'm not going to say whether, I don't want to create degrees of harm, but if you look at things like terrorist content or child nudity, adult nudity, child exploitative images, those are in the 99% that we are proactively removing. And actually, we've agreed for that to be independently audited by EY, all of those systems and numbers, because we know how important this is. Right, so long answer just to give the kind of general perspective, but then specifically the hardest one has absolutely been hate speech in my perspective, because it is so nuanced. And and what I mean by that is the same word, well, one, because obviously we're operating across many languages around the world, but also the same word can have so many different meanings depending on the context and the speaker. So you could have words that are words of hate that we would absolutely remove because they're hate speech if they're being used as a form of hate speech, but they could also be slang words for different things as well, but probably even more complex. And this is the thing we're always trying to get right. And I think you're right, Gareth. I don't know if we ever please everyone, nor can we, but we try to. But when a piece of hate speech is reclaimed by that exact community, often an underrepresented community who don't have voice at all in many other forums or platforms, but do have voice in our platform. If they're using that term, well, they fed back to us really clearly and very quickly that they absolutely demand the right to be able to use that and reclaim that word and use it in their way. So there are multiple uses of language where it really is, we're trying to understand not just a word, but also the intent behind that word, so that we do everything we can to remove hate, and also do everything we can as well to ensure that underrepresented voices that aren't heard elsewhere do have that opportunity to be heard on our platforms.
We know, obviously, the guidelines are probably very clear in Western culture, in the UK, the US, European, or whatever. But then when you go into other cultures, and other things become taboo, don't they? So you need to have, it's just, you just need to understand, because it's all about context, isn't it? Most of the time. Some things are brazenly wrong. I mean, they're easy to remove them, I suppose. But there are other things where you really need to understand the context of that situation, maybe in Indonesia or in, South America or something. It's just.
Well, you definitely need those native language speakers, people that can understand and interpret. But I would say, Gareth, you don't have to go abroad to find that this is nuanced. As I mentioned, there are slur terms. There are homophobic slur terms that can also mean other things as well. Slang, and all of those things are really important for us to really important for us to get right, and we work really hard to do that. Just thinking, the other point in this is, we're often asked, like, why didn't you see this before? Or why this happened? Why didn't you see it coming? And one example I give around this is, and this was a big learning for me because I was relatively new in my Northern European job, is when we had a post was put up in Norway by a journalist, and it contained a photo that's called the Terror of War. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, or the listeners are familiar with it, but if I describe it, you may well be. So it's a very famous piece of photojournalism taken during the Vietnam War, and it's of a child running away from a napalm attack
Oh,
that
I've
had
seen.
recently.
I know the one you're on about. Yeah.
It's called the Terror of War. Now there are many arresting things in that image, but one of the perhaps the most arresting things is that the child is nude. And what we found then is that actually that journalist posted, our systems recognized it as an image of child nudity and immediately removed it. It was then reposted, immediately removed. We then had other people within Norway, including very high-ranking officials, post, and again it was removed. So we had to. So what we found is that actually we'd made, and the question is that the right decision or not? But those are the kind of trade-offs that we're working. And in this case, we found it was a wrong decision to remove that, because that was a picture of historic significance that should be seen and shared and discussed. But it's really hard to imagine when you're designing systems of maximum, a safety and integrity and security, that there might be some exceptions to the child nudity rule. But this was an example of where it is. So we can't always predict everything, but we do look to respond really quickly when we have these new insights.
Just want to jump on to something else very quickly then. Really keen to get your thoughts on this one, Steve. It's a bit of an out there question. What do you think Facebook will look like in 10 years?
And look, the reality is, the reality is I really don't know. But what I do know is that the kind of the mission, whether that's connection or whether that's building community, will be as important to us, a decade from now as it has been for the last decade. And certainly what I hope as we come out of as we begin to come out, although I think everybody feels like the wheels are spinning a little bit, as we begin to come out of the pandemic and the experience that we've had, we being able to help support small businesses. We have 200 million businesses that use our services around the world. We have stacks of those in the UK as well. So being help those small businesses to prosper and under this huge period of dramatic digital transformation that they've had to undergo, I'd like to see that kind of continue. And then, kind of perhaps as well, and maybe this is, I also would like to see us, and we will make even more progress on some of the other areas that you mentioned, Gareth, around kind of ensuring that we're doing every single thing we can to make our platforms as safe as possible. And certainly one of the, maybe this is wildly optimistic, but one of the things I definitely saw during the pandemic was a really heightened sense of community as well. So we saw over 2 million people join a COVID resilient Facebook group, a local one, 2 weeks after the first lockdown here in the UK. And we saw that replicated all the way around the world. And, whilst we might maybe be using technology, maybe even in different ways going forward, I think it's, if there's a lasting legacy, perhaps we do feel that bit closer to the people that are in our area, to our community, because they're people that you maybe have walked past, or buildings you might not have known about, but they've been the people that have been telling you that the eggs are back in stock in Londis, or or bringing you your medicine. And I if there is a hope that there is that those ties of community that have been enhanced by that digital connection will continue.
I could talk to you all day, I'm sure, but obviously I know we're getting towards the end of the allocated time now. So, really important question. Tell us about Steve outside of work.
I love cooking, but I'm not good enough to be a chef. My sister's a chef; she's pretty amazing. I love being active. So I do yoga, done yoga for about 40 years. So I love that. I love running. And I've just recently, this summer, passed my PADI open water, so the very entry level of diving. So I love being on, in, or under the water. So that's just gloriously kind of opened up a whole new world for me. But I'm very lucky. I have an amazing partner. She's terrific, and I got kind of two great kids. So I feel very grateful for what I have.
What career advice would you give to your 21-year-old self?
I honestly, truly believe that if you can show a level of curiosity and you can show a level of kindness for people, you know what, it just keeps coming back to you. So Yeah, and also just don't. I think the same advice everyone gives when they're asked that question, which is don't worry so much. Really, things will be fine. That's Mark Kermode. Things will be fine in the end, and if they're not fine, it's not the end.
You never hear about anyone on their deathbed saying, "I wish I worried more." Do you? I mean, it's
Right. Yeah, 100%.
so no, great advice. And let's finish on this one then. So, what person, book, or even a story or a documentary or something have you been inspired by? Maybe in the last sort of couple of years, or maybe with during the lockdown period or something.
Do you know what? There is a really amazing TED talk by a guy called Benjamin Zander, which is I think it's called Classical Music with Shining Eyes. I can't remember the exact title, but maybe I can send you a link, Gareth, and we can drop it into the podcast notes. It's glorious, and what he talks about is as someone he's a conductor. I don't know a lot about classical music, by the way, but this is and he talks about the learning experiences, but also he talks about his purpose in life, and his purpose in life is to create what he calls shining eyes, and the way he describes it, that shining eyes, that connection that you have with another person when their eyes shine, and whether that's one person to another person or one person to an entire kind of audience. That's what he views as his mission in life, is to create shining eyes around what he does. So I would honestly, if you got 15 minutes today, any day, it's really, really worth watching that. It's genuinely beautiful.
Steve, really enjoyed chatting to you. I think, like I said, I could speak to you all day, but yeah, thank you so much for coming on the Tech Leaders podcast. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Leaders podcast with your host, Gareth Davies. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into all things tech. If you're keen to learn more, make sure you tune in to our next episode. A huge shout out to Be Digital, who make this podcast possible. Go check them out at bedigitaluk.com to gain expert help on enabling your organisation to become lean, agile and attract the right talent. That's bedigitaluk.com. Join the tech revolution with the Tech Leaders podcast.